This section is going to be all about the Google Apps Script docs. So that's the document service and the document app class within the Google scripts. And this service allows scripts to create, access, and modify Google Docs files. The document service creates and opens docs so that they can be edited, modified, and manipulated. So we're looking at bound script. So selecting the active document as well as creating a standalone script, getting the body, appending a paragraph, adding page breaks, adding body content, including horizontal lines, creating docs using the Google App Create method, also adding properties to the docs, getting the text that's contained within the docs. There's also some JavaScript where we're going to be generating rows of content, so interacting with tables, interacting with paragraphs, also how we can create a mini app that's going to translate some of the content, so the selected content within the Google Doc, do a quick translation of the content, interacting with the UI menu, adding in advanced functionality, running functions from the UI menu so the user of the doc can go in, select from the menu, select the function that they want to use, and then have some results and functionality produced within their doc experience. Also getting the children, so getting all of the child elements contained within the doc, looping through them, setting attributes, creating lists, how we can add bookmarks, how we can add images, inserting, replacing text. A number of exercises and mini coding projects as well are included. So one of them is to add text within the doc menu, also finding and highlighting text within your doc, and then inserting images into the doc. And this is going to be all done through the UI menu as mini application projects. And you can use the source code within the other projects to connect the various apps together and explore the functionality that's available within the Google Doc app service. So let's get started. Hey, in this section, we are going to be looking at the document service. So this is the document app class. So let's go ahead and create a bound script within a document. I've got my Google Drive opened and under New, selecting under the Google Docs and going over and creating a blank document. So this is going to serve as our document bound script. So within this document, we're going to have our bound script. And access to the script editor is going to be under Tools. And then going down under the Tools, somewhere near the bottom there, you've got the script editor. So go ahead and click that, and that's going to open up the script editor. And within the script editor, let's give it a name. And we've got the default function. So let's create a brand new function. And we'll just call it test doc. And then within the test doc, let's select the document object. And we're using the document app class in order to select the object. And then we want to get the active document. And using the logger log, let's output what we have within the doc. And then run the test document within the execution logs. We should see that we do have the connection to the active document, and that means that we're ready to start writing into the active document. We do, of course, have to accept the permissions. So go through accept the permissions to the script, and you can always remove out permissions, revoke access. So going over to the My Account.google.com/permissions, and that will give you a listing of all of the permissions for apps that you've provided, and you can remove permissions from there as well to the different scripts that you've created. So once we accept the permissions, we've got the document object, and that means that we've got the document object and we're ready to go. We need to select the body of the content. So we've got the document object and running a method get body. This will select the body contents. And currently we don't have anything within the body. So we can log that out as well within the log. So we've got the document body section. And once we've got the document body section, we can take the body, and we've got a number of options here where we can append a paragraph. So let's go ahead and add in a paragraph. And this is just a text value. We're going to write out hello world. Append the hello world to the body of the document. Let's run that, open up the document, and there we go. We've got hello world being added. And if we run it again, it's going to add another hello world. So it's going to continuously append paragraphs. And if we want to break the paragraphs, so those are both within the same paragraph. So within the body, let's use the append page break. And that's just going to be a method that we're going to run, and that's going to create a brand new page break. So that will be that every time we run the test document, we're going to append the paragraph at the top, and that's going to be on a new page. So it's going to be creating separate pages with the page break for the new paragraphs. So we ran it one time, and now let's run it again. And that's created the separate page, the second page with hello world. So go ahead and try this. Open up bound script and access the document, and then append a paragraph to the document. And coming up next, we're going to be using a standalone script to do the same thing, where we're going to access the body of the document, and then we're going to append some content to that body. So that's coming up next in the next lesson. In the last lesson, we saw how we can access bound script and then write some code within the script editor and add content to the document. So this lesson, we're going to be using a standalone script, and we're going to do the same format where we're going to select the body and then append some content into the body. So for the standalone script, I'm going over at script.google.com and home start. So I'm going to go ahead and just create a brand new project, and that's going to open up the editor, and we'll just give it a name of standalone doc. And then within the function, and I'll call it add to doc. So first thing we need to do is select the document object. So just as we did with the bound script, we use the DocumentApp, and then we specify where the DocumentApp is located. So we can select it by ID and as well as URL. So let's track the ID. And the ID of the document is available within the web URL. So it's usually the easiest way to select and get the ID of the URL through the URL there. So you can select it, and it's just past the d/ and then that long set of characters before the /edit is your document ID for that specific document. So now that we've got the document ID, let's use the document app and open by ID, and we also have the option to open by URL, so that would be the full web URL of the document. So within the document app, it returns the document with the specified ID, so let's add the ID into the doc app, and within the logger, we'll log out the contents of doc, just to make sure that we do have it selected properly. So let's run the script. We're going to have to provide permissions to the app. Since this is standalone and it's not related to the one we did in the last lesson, so let's accept the permissions. Select the account that you want to provide the permissions with, and then hit the go to standalone app, and then here it's going to give you information about the permissions that you're adding. You can also hit the information icon to get more information about the various permissions. And if you want to remove out the permissions, you can go to the myaccount.google.com/permissions, and from there you're going to have a listing of all of the apps by their names, and from there you could remove out permissions. So we've got connection to the document, and once we've got the connection to the document, we can select the document and we can write some content to it. So just as we did with the bound script, we need to select the body object, and this will give us the opportunity to add content to it. So get the body of the content, and then within the body we can add paragraphs, we can add tables, we can add list items, we can add a horizontal rule. So let's do a paragraph first, and I'll write out hello world. And then also within the body, we're going to append a horizontal rule. And then body, append page break method. And save. And let's run the script. So we already have some content in there. So this is the new content that we've added. So there's the paragraph. There's the horizontal rule, and then we've got a line break for the next set of content. So just after the horizontal rule, we've got a page break, so breaking it into another page. Also, with script, you can create documents, and creating documents is really easy to do. So let's create a function. I'll just call it create my doc. And then within this function, we're going to select the document object, and using the document app, create. And this is the method that creates a new document, and it returns the new document object. So we need to provide a name. So it's expecting a string value for the name. I just call it new doc tester. And that's it. Just with the one line, you can select and you can create the doc. And then we can actually do what we did here as well. And what I'll do is I'll take this out as a string name, and I'll just call it my name. So it'll be a string value. And then we'll use the variable name of my name to create it. And then also we'll concatenate it when we're adding the paragraph. So let's try it out and create my doc. So select the next function, create my doc, and we're going to run that function. And execution completed. So let's see what happened within the drive. We've got a document that was just created. So it's new doc tester. So let's open that up. And then within the new doc tester, we've got the paragraph, we've got the horizontal break, and then we've got the page break. So that was all done on the fly with the Google Apps script creating a document. So the objective of this lesson, the previous lesson, is to get familiar with selecting the document that you want to use. So these are all the document objects. Once you select the document object, you can get the body of the document, and from there you can provide and get additional information. Let's try one more where we've got the create new document, and I'm going to update this to let. And we're creating the document object, and we want to get the ID of the document. So within the log, the doc object, we can use the get ID to return back the ID value of the document. And also we can set the name of it, so we can actually rename it to something with the ID. So how about we update the name of the document, and we're going to add to it. So just do a concatenation of it and add the ID to it. And then we'll set the name, so just use a space there, and set the name to my name. So that way we're going to include the newly created document ID in the name. Try that and run that. So we created a new doc, and then we've added and updated the name of the document. And when we open that, we see that we've got the content there, and we've got the ID of the document. So this ID actually matches what we've got up here. And how about we try one more? We'll get some more information from the doc. So within the log, the doc object, we can also get the URL of the doc if we want. So how about we append a paragraph within the body, append paragraph, and within the paragraph content, we can output the doc URL. And we'll do a few more so that we're producing a doc with a whole bunch of useful information about the document itself. So we can get the viewers, we can get the name of it as well. So I do need to have the rounded brackets in order to invoke the method. So we've got the name of the document. And I'll do add in some string values here, so we've got some more context to what we're adding, and then we'll produce the document. And in this case, so we've got the name, we've got the URL, we can get the editors. And what I'll do is I'll log out the editors in the log. So let's see what happens when we run it one more time. And so within the editors, we've got the editors there. So first we're logging out the ID, then we're logging out the URL, and I forgot the rounded brackets, so it didn't actually get the URL there. Let's go back into the drive, and we're going to see what we've logged out. So we've got hello world and tester, the URL with the URL value, so it matches with what we've got for the URL up here within the web URL. We've got the name tester docs, so that's going to be the name of the document. And the editor is going to be presented, even though this is an array, we're able to see the contents of the array as we output it within a string format into the document. So that's going to correspond with what we have here within the execution log. So this way you can produce a document and have some additional information about the document, including updating the name as you're creating it, with some of the values that are associated and some of the properties are associated by Google for the document itself. In this lesson, we're going to be selecting the text that's contained within the document. So I'm going to make some updates, and we'll get some more text in there. And then also just going to add in some placeholder text. And of course, we can do this with script as well. So let's go into the standalone script, and I'm going to grab the ID of this newly created document that we have and go into the Google Apps script, and we're going to get the content and update content within this Google Doc. So let's select the document object, and using the document app, open by ID, and then we're going to open it by the ID value. And within the script as well, let's add in the ID value of the document. So we've selected the doc, and once we've selected the doc, just like within the last lesson, we want to get the body object. So we can do that by getting the parent doc, and then using the get, and actually this should be lowercase, get body, and that's going to return back the body contents. And we saw in the last lesson how we can add content to it. So let's do a quick loop, and we'll add some additional content to the body. So this is just regular JavaScript loop. We'll let I equals 0, and we'll loop while I is less than 10, and increment I plus 1. So you can mix and match the typical JavaScript functionality directly within the functions within the Google Apps script. So what I want it to do is I want to generate a bunch of content within the body. So we've got the body object. We can append a paragraph, and then within the paragraph, we're going to create some dynamic content, and I'll just create some temporary content. So we're using the template literals, so the backticks, and add the temporary content into the paragraph. So let's try and run update the content and go back into the code, and we see that we were able to run through and we're generating the numbers. So let's go back into the script, and this is a template literal using the backticks. The backticks are typically to the left of the 1 key on your keyboard, and then bringing in variables using the $sign and the curly brackets. And then you could indicate the variable that you want to bring in. And the nice thing about using the template literals is that you have an opportunity to create multiple lines. So it's not as strict as using the quotes. And then also you don't have to worry about the quote issues. So even if you have something with quotes there or double quotes, that's all going to work. And save that. And I'm going to clear out the content that's in here so we don't have all the page breaks. So save and run the script one more time. Let's see what content gets created here. So now we've got a bunch of content that's ready to go. And as you can see, we've duplicated it. We've ran it 10 times. So that's added some content into the body object. So what we want to do in the next function is select the content from the body. So using function, and we want to select the content from the document object using the same 3 here at the top. So selecting it by ID, opening it by ID, and getting the body contents. Now we've got all of the body contents, and we want to get, and I'll just create a variable called data, and then within the data we've got body, and we're going to use the function. We've got a number of functions that are available within the body, so we can get the paragraphs, we can get the text. So let's first try selecting the text into the data object, and within the log we'll take a look at how that looks within the log, and then also show you some other ways that you can get some of the content. So select content and run the function, and this is just executing within the logs. So we get the whole content block. We also have an opportunity to get the block of content, so within the const, and I'll just call it paras, and then body, let's get the paragraphs, and we'll log that information out and run a selection of the content as well. So we get a bunch of paragraph objects, and these represent the elements of the page. So in this case we've got a number of paragraphs, and I believe there's probably about 14 there, and this is being returned back within an array format, and then you could actually loop through them and get the content as well, and we're going to be doing that in the upcoming lesson. So this was just an illustration of how you can select the content. If you want just the whole bulk content, you can do it by get text. If you want the paragraph elements by themselves, then you can select them individually. So let's do one more thing before we conclude, and that's to get the text content from data, and we're going to translate it into another language. And this is really easy to do with the Google Apps script, because it does have the language apps functionality where you can select the language and update the selected content with whatever the new language is that you want to use. So if we wanted to translate it to Spanish, for instance, using the language app translate, and then it requires some parameters that we want to translate. So one of them is going to be the string value, and we've already have that within the get text within the data. So grab that string value in data and then take it from English. So it has the pop-up will tell you that for translate we need to have a string value, and then we need to have the source language, so that's also a string value. For English it's EN. And then the target language is going to be Spanish, and the short code for that is ES. So it's a language code which is written, and it allows you to select auto detect language and translate the text from the source language to the destination language. So I've got an example here of where we're using the language app. We're translating this as a test from English to Spanish, and then within the log it's outputting the Spanish version. So we're doing this for the entire document, and we'll see how that translates and using Spanish. And then once we've translated it into, we'll call it span version for Spanish version. And once we've translated it, we can take the body using the append paragraph, and let's append the Spanish version to the paragraph. And actually, just before we do that, let's also append a horizontal rule so that we get a break, and also body append paragraph, and we'll just write it that this is going to be in Spanish, and also do a horizontal rule above it so it stands out on the page. So let's go ahead and run the select content and see what happens. So it gets outputted. So we selected this content, we produced the horizontal rule, wrote in Spanish, another horizontal rule, and then generated the output using the translate and generated the output in Spanish. So it's as easy as that to select the content and update the content and even change the language of the content. So go ahead, try it out, and I've got some more really neat things to do in the upcoming lessons with the content where we're going to be selecting it by the paragraphs. So that's all still yet to come. Hey, welcome back. Now that we've got quite a lot of content within the doc that we've been working with, let's make a selection of this document, and then we're going to go through the different paragraphs, and I'll show you how you can access the content contained within the paragraphs. So this is another way to get the content, and we'll just call it get para, and set up the ID of the document, because that's one of the first things that we always need to do is select the document object. So select the document, and using the DocumentApp class, open by ID, specify the ID that we're opening it by, and then within the body, this is where all the content is contained. So that's why we need to always get the body object. And then for the paragraphs, we can use the body, and we've got all of this information, so we can get images that are contained in there, get list items, get margins, and the one that we're going to look at right now is get paragraphs. And in the last lesson we saw when we logged out the paragraphs that this was going to be an array of objects. So let's get all of the paragraphs, and we've got the whole array of different paragraph objects. So that means that we can also take the paragraphs and use for each to loop through each one. And I'll just give it an ID of P. And then as we loop through, let's log out the paragraph. And we can select content that's contained within the paragraph. And we can also set styles as well to it. So we can set headings for that paragraph. So how about we do that, where we'll set a heading for the paragraph. And actually, we don't want to set headings for all the paragraphs. So we'll select the paras, and we'll just select the first one. And we'll set a heading for the first one. And now going back into the document, so this is going to be the first piece of content that we have. So let's see what happens. And using the DocumentApp, we need to have some formatting. So we're going to do a paragraph formatting. And then the different types of headings here are in the drop down. So if we want it to set it to heading 1, we could do it within this format. So it'll set the first paragraph as a heading. And then within the log, we'll take the paragraphs and we'll just get the text from each one of the paragraphs, and we'll output that into the log. So we can see how each paragraph is broken down. So let's run the function, get the paragraphs. So it shows us the text from each one of the paragraphs. And the first one, so we've got the execution started. So let's go back to the doc, and we see nothing happened, but we did get a heading here for this first one. So that was actually blank, and that when we were selecting that, that was blank, and that's why we didn't actually select the first item, and it was added, the heading was added to the first item. So let's try that one more time. We'll do a run through, and this time we did select the first item there, and then we added the heading 1 to it. So we can also, as we loop through, we can get the index value, and we can update the text. So from the paragraph, we can use, so just as we get text, we can set text, and let's update the text. I'll create a variable, just call it temp, and this is going to get the paragraph get text, and then update temp. So we're going to add, or take temp, and we'll add to temp the index value, and we'll put a dot, and then add the rest of temp to it. And then for the set text, it's expecting a string value, so we'll set the text of the paragraph. So let's try that one more time. We're going to run through. And we see that what's happened here is that it's given numerical values in front of each one of the paragraphs. So let's output all of those paragraphs values there. I'm going to get rid of some of them, so we've got quite a bit less there on the page. And we'll get rid of some of them. And it's hard to tell just by looking at your document how many paragraphs you actually have. So just get rid of all of the first ones there. And I'll add this one in, and this one hopefully should be first. And we'll run the script one more time. So let's clear that and run the script and go back to the document. So it did select the document, and then it added to the document the text. And I'll just set it to equals. So that's why it was doubling it up there, because it was doing the doubling up of that. So let's do an undo. And I'll get rid of more content that we have there. So it's a little bit confusing with so much content. So it selected the first paragraph. And even if we have some blank spaces, let's see what happens. Run it again. And even the blank spaces, so they're also considered paragraphs. So even though you don't see anything on the screen, these are separate objects, and that you could select them individually with the Google Apps script. And as we loop through the paragraphs, we can see that we can get the text from the paragraph. We can get the type. So maybe we also want to write this information here to the paragraph itself. So we can get the text, we can get the type, and we'll also get the text alignment there. And we can also output that information. And I'm just updating it, adding in the spaces. And let's try to run that one more time. So let's see what happens. So it's outputting that it's a paragraph, so the type is a paragraph. Null is referencing the value of the text alignment. So there's no text alignment set, so it returns back the value of null to there. So if we were to set some text alignments and run the script again, and let's select that and format. So the line and the indent. And I'm just adding in the subscript for the text alignment. And we'll run it one more time. So this time it does get the text alignment as superscript. So there are three options for text alignment. There's normal, there's subscript, and superscript. And the subscript, I'm going to do format of the text. And there's one more that will produce a value of normal. So the null is when nothing is set. So now we've got superscript. We've got subscript for the text alignment that's being output. And we're also continuously updating the text. And as we loop through, we're getting the index value. So we're adding that to the output of the content. And then we're setting the type, the text alignment, and then outputting whatever content was existing within that paragraph already. And just as we were setting the text, we can also set the text alignment. And just as we saw with the heading, we use the DocumentApp class, and then we use the text alignment formatting. And within the text alignment formatting, then we can select from normal, subscript, or superscript. So we'll just set them all back to normal and run through it one more time. And if we run it again, we do get the paragraph set as normal, because we now at this point we've already set the paragraph values for the text alignment. So coming up next, we're going to do a little bit more with the paragraphs and the content contained within the paragraphs within the doc. As we saw in the last lesson, there's quite a bit that we can do with the paragraphs. We're looping through the paragraphs. We're setting the heading for the first element that is a paragraph and updating the paragraph headings there. And we also have an opportunity for different types of content. So I'm going to get rid of the content that we have, and also let's add in a list. Now we've got some content available within the document, and let's run through the paragraph. So with the paragraph selection, it's not only selecting the paragraphs, but it's also selecting the list items. So even though the type is not a paragraph, it's still selecting those. So that's something to keep in mind, as we were just selecting the paragraphs, but those were different types, so they were as list items. So it also selected those, and it updated the content contained within those. So there is also a method to append the text content. So let me update the document once again, and I'm just going to be using the Google Docs and version history and give a name for this version for history, and I'll call it default version, so that I can quickly revert to this version. And instead of going through and updating the paragraphs, let's update some of the functionality we've got here. And as we're looping through, we can still log out the information. We're not going to be setting the heading anymore. And we want to get the paragraph content as text. So selecting the paragraph and get text of the paragraph. And we also have an opportunity to append to the paragraph, so we can append text to the paragraph. So taking the paragraph object, and we've got an opportunity to append text to it. And I'm going to append the index value to the paragraph. So this is going to be appending it at the end. So let's run through the paragraphs. And we see the count once again, so we do have the 10 paragraphs there. So let's comment out the appending of the text and look at what we've got within the options here. So get the number of children that it has and run. So they all just have the one child. I'm going to get rid of the blank lines. And the children are part of the container element, so within the paragraph. So if you were to go split one of the paragraphs, or if you were to add in bold, insert a horizontal rule. So if we go to insert horizontal rule, what this is going to do is this is just going to create a new paragraph that we've got. And these are all different parent container elements that are within the body. So it's not going to create any elements inside, so they're all going to still have the one child contained within them. And even though that we've split them off, these are all going to be on the root level, on the same level as and all have the same parent, which is going to be the body object. So if we were to select the paragraph, and selecting paragraph 1, and then we do a get next sibling. So which paragraph is this going to return back? We're going to log this out into the log. So it's selecting paragraph next sibling, and let's output the text content. So, and we'll just get the type. So run through. And we're looking at that last part there where we've got a list item. So it's getting the type as a list item. Paragraph 2. And I'll comment out that value. So within the log, we've got the paragraph 2. And we want to get the text content of paragraph 2. So get text. So we can see what's contained into it. And so it's 2, 3. So this one is number 2 paragraph, with the index of 2, and this is 0 based, so 0, 1, 2, and that's why we're referring to that as the second item with the index value of 2, so it's going to be this one. And we'll just run it one more time. So making the selection, and it is a list type. And when we get the next sibling, we need to get as text, and then get text, so that we can see what the next sibling to this paragraph is. So let's run through. and now it's going to be 3, 4, and we need to transform that object as text in order to get the text. So it's not going to just automatically move to the paras 3. It's going to require, whenever you do the next sibling, this is going to go back to the container object, and then we have to specify that we want it to get it as text, and then at that point we can get the text contents of it. So even though this will work as well, it's going to look at that the get text does not exist on the element type, even though it does, and if we do run it, it will return back the text. The proper way to do it is to include the as text method before you get the text of it, because we're not sure what the sibling type is, and that even if it's got text contained within it. So that's why you just got to be careful and add in the as text, even though it'll work with just get text. So go ahead, try it out. Next, we're going to do some more navigation through the different elements and manipulation of the elements on the page. In this lesson, we're going to be looking at getting the body elements. So just create a function that's going to return back the body elements, and then set up our selection of the main document that we're going to be using. So let's go ahead and going to use the same one that we used the last time. So we do have some content in there, and selecting it by ID. So that's how we're going to open up the document object using the DocumentApp, and then open by ID, specifying the ID that we're going to be used to open it. And then let's next select the body object, and using the doc and get body method, that's going to return back the body object. And within the logger, we're using the body object, and we can get the number of children that the body has. So just as we saw with the paragraph, we can return back the number of children the body has. Let's run the script. And in this case, we've got 8 children within the body. So that means that we can do a loop, and loop while I is less than the body get number of children, and then increment I by 1. And then as we loop through, we'll log out each one of the child elements, and within the body get child, and we're going to get that child by its index value, which is going to be represented by the value of 1. So let's log that and do a run. So it gives us the type. So we've got a paragraph, list item, list item, list item, paragraph. And it gives us what type of body object that we're dealing with. Let's create a holder for that object. And then within the object itself, we can return back the text from that object. So within the logger log, take temp, and then we've got some options here as well. So we can get the type of the element. Let's run that. So it's giving us the type, and the types are the ones that are in capitalized, and get the content inside. So from the temp, we need to use the get as text. So we're using the temp object as text. And then from here, we can get the text that's contained within there. So we saw that in the last lesson with the paragraphs as well. And now within the logger log, we can output the symbol for the content inside. So that will return back the content that's contained within each one. And if we go back to the document, you can see we've got the content that's contained in there. And some of them might not have content. So you can do a condition to check to see if there's content there or not. We can update and we can add to that element. So when we get the temp element, so we can force it as, if we want it to be as a paragraph. So what we saw before with the paragraphs, we can get this item as a paragraph. And then once it's as a paragraph, we can also get the text that's contained within it. And we can also insert text if we want. So let's insert text, and we'll just say test with the insert, and also concatenate whatever the value of I is. And we'll have a condition to check to see the type. So we'll check to see if temp type is equal to paragraph. And if it is, then we're going to add text to it. So it's only going to be adding to the paragraphs and inserting text to the paragraph. So it's expecting when you are inserting that it needs two arguments. So we need to have the child index and then the content that we're inserting. So save that and let's run. And let's go back to the document. So it's inserted the text only into the paragraphs. And it's inserting it as a child object into it. Let's run it again. Save. And this time we're inserting new. And when we're providing an index value of 0, so that's inserting it before the existing text. If we update that and have an index value of elements, so let's do 1. So now it's inserting it afterwards. So it's taking that original content and it's inserting it afterwards. So you can use the 0 to insert before on the index and 1 to insert afterwards. And that's how you can update the text content of the body children as you loop through them and select the children. And let's also do one more thing where if we do have a paragraph, we're going to select the temp object. So we want to specify it that it is a paragraph, so as paragraph. And that's going to open up the other options where you can set the text as well. And we want to select that text and edit it as text. So let's select edit as text. And the difference between edit as text and as text. So what happens is with the edit as text, it obtains the text version of the current element for editing, and you can use edit as text for manipulating elements, content such as rich text. And the reason that we're using edit as text as opposed to just as text, the difference here is that we know that this is a paragraph type. So this is returning the current element as a paragraph, whereas over here, it can be any type. So when we use as text, it simply returns it as text, and it doesn't know it's not for any specific element, known specific type of the element. And whereas here we've got a paragraph, so that's where we're using the edit as text. And then from here we can also get the text as well. So it's going to return back the text. And we also have some other options where we can manipulate some of the text content. So we can do things like set the font size. And the font size itself, if we want to set the font size to the entire block, we have some option parameters here for the font size. So we can do an offset for the start position of the font size, and also the size. So it's expecting a number, and offset inclusive, so for any end size. So offset for the start, offset for the end, and these are all numeric values. So we can enter in a number of parameters here to set the font size. So let's enter in a font size, and then afterwards we'll run through the script again, and we're going to update on a particular font size. So do a run, and this should be updating for the paragraphs. And it looks like we got an error there with the temp as paragraph. That's because we're setting the value of the insert to be 1 with an index value of 1. So it needs to be less than that and match the children the element has. And I'm going to remove that out. So now we're running through and we're selecting all the paragraphs and we're updating the font size. So what gets returned here is that we get the execution being returned back as a text element. So we can use text element. And I'll comment out the other logs. So we just have the one log running. So we're getting it returned back as a text object. And that's because we're doing an edit as text. So val itself is now a text object, and it also has the ability to update some of the content for that object. So now that we've selected that text object, let's update that and set the background color. And the background color, so we've got an ability to do an offset, start, and so it's requiring an integer, and then as well as a color string value. So we're expecting the 3 parameters, and then whatever the string value is for the color, the hex value that we want to use for the color. And we'll set the background color to this. So let's run that and see what happens. So we were able to select a part of the text and update and set the background color from a start position. And the reason that we're getting this error is that we're looping through all of the paragraphs, and some of them might not have the enough text to set it from 10 to 20. So let's take a look at that, and we're going to update the start position. So set a variable for start position, and we're also going to set a variable for the end position. And the end position is going to be whatever the paragraph, the edit as text, and we're going to get the text and the length of the string, and then the start position can be just value of 1. So hopefully we've got enough there that we can update the color and that we're not going to throw any more errors. And we are just looking for the paragraphs as well. So let's run. And it looks like we ran into an error again. Oh, and I didn't update the end and start positions. That's why we still got that same consistent error. So let's use the start position and end position and run the script. And we'll just set the end position to 3. So hopefully there's at least 3, a length of 3. So it does have some that are less than 0. So we'll only set this if the length value, so we'll turn this into a condition where we've got the length value. So we'll do a condition, and if length is greater than 5, then we'll set the background color. I'll try that one more time. So hopefully we should work this time. So the reason that we're throwing the errors is because we do have the blank. So when we do have a blank, then it's going to throw an error because it doesn't have that start position and end position within the index that's available. So that's why we were throwing the error there, and we did find a quick solution for that. So go ahead, try it out. Select some of your text, update the font size. And come up next, we'll have another example of how to interact with the elements on the page. Hey, in this lesson, we are going to be selecting the document that we used before. So let's grab its ID, and I'm just grabbing the ID from the URL. So we're going to make a standalone and grab the contents of the doc contents. I'll give it a function name doc contents. Let's set up the ID value. So that's the ID value of the document, and then selecting the document object by using the document app. And then from the document app, we're going to open by ID and use that ID value to open up the document. And then also let's select the body of the document. So using the document and get body is going to get the body contents of the document. So we can also select the body contents and edit as text. So what edit as text is going to do is this is going to allow us to edit as a rich text format for the content. So I'll just create another object that's going to hold the body content and allow us to edit as text. And within the logger log, let's log the text output and run the document contents. So it's going to return it back within a text format. And once it's within a text format, this allows us to update some of the text content. So we can select the text object. And because within a text format, we have an option to insert some text. And if we want to insert it before, then we use an index value of 0. So this is going to be the offset of which character offset we want to insert to. So this could be any numeric value. So I want to insert it in the beginning, and I'm going to set that at 0. And then whatever we want to insert, so I just call it new text, start, and insert the new text. So let's run the code and see what gets inserted. So it inserted that new chunk of text into our content. If we want to insert it at a different index value, let's select where we want to insert it. And I'm also going to select and use these as objects so that we can utilize the objects that are being returned back. So we do get some response and return back. And I'll just have this as new. And I'll just do this one as second, or maybe first and second. So first and second. So where do we want to insert this? We've got quite a bit of text. So let's select at spot number 20 to insert the text and do a quick reset on the document and run the code. And we see where we've got it inserted. So first was at index value of 0. And this is index for the string of the text. So we can also see, so if I comment these out, and within the logger log, we can text and get text, and that will allow us to return back a length value for the object. So this will tell us how much text we have within the string, and this is typical with JavaScript with just the string methods. So let's run that, and we're just logging into the console. So we've got 84 characters within the text string, and that's where we're fairly safe to go with the 20 to insert the text. So let's do this another time and select val1 and set the font size. So set it to 20, so it's expecting just an integer value. And val2 will set the font to bold, and we'll just set it to true. So it's expecting a Boolean value in here. And you can also set a start and an offset. So set it to true. And try that one more time. So it's setting all of the content to the dark Boolean value. So because we're inserting it at starting spot 20 and the word second is 6 characters long, let's do a select on this. And we can do a reset of it as well if we want. So run the code. And let's run that. So it'll detect what we want bolded, and it'll set those to bold. And I'll do a restore back to the initial version. And you can also chain together. So if we want to set the font size to 24 of the value that's been inserted, and then also set bold and set that to a Boolean value of true. And we need to also still keep the start and the offsets in order to apply it to the particular property. And this one is going to be at 0 and 3. So that's going to be where we're setting the font size. And we don't have to return them back, because that's just returning back the entire text object as we saw. So this is a more specific how we can reset the size of big and bolded. And actually that's not going to be too big, so let's make it even bigger. And within the text document, I'm going to reset the size back to the default and remove the bolding, and we'll run the script. So the big got big, the bolded got bolded. And let's try that one more time. I'll update this to just say hello world. And that's how you can be more specific with the content that you want to update, by selecting it. And you can, usually the best place to apply any additional properties is just to chain it together. So also if we want to change the background color, we can change the background color here as well. And again, we need to be specific where we're starting, where we're ending. And it's expecting the color value, so it is expecting those parameters. And we'll set it to whatever color that's going to turn out to be. And because we're starting with an index value of 0, and we've got 3 characters. The reason that it's grabbing the next one is that I need to update this to say only 2. So let's run that one more time. So when you are applying the updates for the bold and the font, make sure that you are selecting whatever the starting index value is of the string, and you can count through. So it's being applied to the first value is being applied to the start value of the index, and then the last one is being applied to the last index value. And I also have to update the background color. And we can also change the font color. So I'll set the starting position at 0, 2. So these numbers need to match. And I need one more F in there. So try that one more time. And one of the easiest ways to accomplish this is to actually just set a variable for the start if you're applying multiple changes to a certain block of text that you want to apply to. And then the same thing for the bold as well. And now this is going to be 8 characters. And this is going to be 9 characters. It's a whole lot easier if you've just got one variable that's doing all of that. So there's the new bold, and there's the new color. So go ahead, try it out, select some content from your document, edit it as text, and that will create the whole body as really easy to select and update some of the formatting within it. In this lesson, we're going to be applying style attributes. So let's create a function, and we'll call it add styles. And I'll remove out the other D, and we'll set up the selection of the document. I've also pasted in some lorem ipsum text in there, so I've got some more real looking text and words to work with. Select the doc object using the DocumentApp, opened by ID. Select the ID that you want to use in order to open up the doc, and then next let's grab the body. And so using the doc get body method, and that's going to have the body within the document. So what we want to do is we want to list out all of the paragraphs. So we'll get all of the paragraphs contained within the body object. So body get paragraphs, and that's going to return back a list of paragraphs. So we can also, within the logger, let's log out some of the paragraphs. So paras, and that's going to have a length value to it. So we can see how many paragraphs we're returning back. Let's run get styles. And apparently we've got 10 paragraphs here. So it's probably 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then 10 for the last one. So if I remove out that last space, then we should actually have 9. So looping through paras for each, we're going to select it as an element, and using the arrow format within the logger log. So for each paragraph, we're going to get the text contained within each one. So let's run that now. So, and as we see for the info there, we've got every other one. So some of them are blank, they don't have any text. And the text as well will have a length value. So we can have a condition that checks to make sure that the text of the element has a length of at least it's greater than 0. So now we're only going to return back the ones that have a length greater than 0. Turning back the 5 that have a length greater than 0, and this first one up here, the value of 9 is just this logger entry. So we can remove that and look at only ones that have the length. So what if we wanted to set a certain attribute to all of them? We can get the attributes of the elements. So within the logger log, we've got the elements, and we want to get the attributes from the element. So using the getAttributes method. And what this will do is this is going to return back the attributes for the method. And so what attributes does, it retrieves the element's attributes. So if we've got element content that's set to bold or italic, we're going to see that within the attributes. So run, and we're just getting all of the attributes. So these are the attribute properties that we have. And let's also get the number of children that they have. So we're not getting the attributes, so there's been no change in that. Get the number of children, so we can see how many children they have. So they all just have the one child. So let's create a default object, and we can call it style1. And we're going to do it within a similar format. So this is just going to be an object. And just as we saw with all of the attributes that we have, when we run through and we get all of these attributes, this is within an object format. And I'll just copy and paste it down here. So this gives us an idea of what's available for us to update, and we can set within the style properties all of these attributes. So if we want to set a particular font size within the style, we can do that. So let's take the style1, and for the style1, and we're going to use the bracket notation. And using the DocumentApp and attribute, this is going to give us a listing of all of the attributes that we have available to us. So selecting the font size, and we have to assign a value to it. So let's assign a value of 22. We can also update the foreground color and the background color. So let's add those ones as well. These are ones that you might typically want to do. So same format, and instead of font size, we're going to do the foreground color. So it's expecting a string value for it. So hash whatever the foreground color we want to use. And let's do one for the background color. So select the background color, and just need the one dot there. And I'll set the background color to be black. So now we've got a style listing, so we've got a style object that we can apply to the element. So let's apply it, and we'll check to see. So we'll get the index value, and we'll only apply it to one of the elements. So if index is equal to 2, then we're going to select the element, set attributes, and the attributes that we're going to be setting are going to be coming from the style1 object. So what do you think is going to happen here when we run the script? We're going to apply the styling to the index, the one with the index value of 2. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that as we're looping through. And remember, we are skipping some. We are skipping the ones that have a value of less than 0. So that's why we've got the index value of 2, and that's referencing the second item there that we have. Remember, we do have 9 as a total paragraphs. So this is a quick and easy way that you can apply different style attributes to chunks of text. And then also within the attributes, it is expecting an object. So let's go ahead and append some text to the element. And remember, this is the ones that have a length of greater than 0. So L and then append, and we want to append text to this. So we can't append a paragraph, we want to append text. So including the value of new. And then for this object, we want to apply the style to that. So let's create a variable that's going to contain that particular element object that we've just added. And then we can select that individually as val and then set attributes. And we'll set the attributes of style1 to that. So now in each paragraph, we've added in the word new with the background And we've selected that as we loop through each one of these that are matching and setting the attributes to that element that we've just added. So that element object that we've just added. And this makes it a really easy way to make updates. So whatever the hexadecimal value. And if you want to have more than one style, you can do that as well. So we can have this one as style 2. And this is a nice easy way to create some styles where we can apply this. And so in this case, we're going to apply the attribute of 2. And then for this one, we're just going to apply the attribute of new with the style 1. So you can have multiple styles within your project. And that's going to create the style with the red background. So go ahead, try it out, and create some style attributes that you can apply to your content within your doc. Hey, in this lesson, we are going to be using the same document as before, but we're going to be replacing some of that text within the document. So wherever it's got some lorem, we're going to replace that with Lawrence. So let's select and create the function that's going to run the code. And I'll just call it replacer. So it's going to loop through the entire document, and this is going to be within the standalone script. So we need to create an ID and then select the doc value. Let's grab the ID from the document that we want to use. And we don't need the slash, just the ID. And then using the document app, we're going to open by ID. So select the ID using the ID value that we just had, the string value, and then get the body. And we're actually going to do this all within one. So we're going to select the body by the one statement and then get the body here. So that's going to save us one line of code and just simplify things a little bit. So now that we've got the body, we want to replace some of the text within the body. So let's select the body object and use the method replace text. So it does require some parameters. And the replace text, the way that that works is it replaces all occurrences of a given text pattern with a given replacement string using regular expressions. So a search pattern is passed as a string, not as a JavaScript regular expression. So because of this, you'll need to escape any backslashes within the pattern. So they have an example here of the text that it's looking for. And it's selecting using the regex pattern to search for the content, and it's going to be replacing it with apps script. So anything that looks like apps script, it's going to be replacing with the apps script. So in this case, we want to search for lorem and replace it with Lawrence. And we'll see what happens. We'll run this first, and then we'll make some updates to the regular expression. So it did replace the value of lorem with Lawrence, but it didn't handle the lowercase one. So even though it found and replaced those, it wasn't able to find the ones that had the lowercase. So let's revert it back, run it again. So we'll remove out the changes that we made. Let's update the regular expression. And this method actually uses the Google's RE2 regular expression library. So let's take a look at what's contained within this GitHub regular expression library. And there's more information about what you can do within the wiki as well. So you can go over to support.google.com, and there's some examples of regular expressions that you can use. And there's quite a bit that we can cover if we want to with the regular expressions. And if we want to make it case insensitive, then we need to add in the bracket $I for the flag to indicate that we want to have it as case insensitive. So bracket $I as the flag to select it as case insensitive. And so we're looking for lorem, and we're replacing it with Lawrence. So do it all uppercase so we can see. And let's add in some more values for lorem and run the code one more time. So it is selecting and updating regardless of the case. And then you can use the other examples there as well. So let's also take a look at what gets returned back. So what's the response that gets returned back here? And within the logger log, we'll log out the response object. And I'm going to add in some examples of lorem again, and we'll run the code. So what we get is a document body selection that gets returned back. And within the document body selection, let's set the attributes for that. We're going to create an object called style. And that will contain the attributes. So this right now is just going to be just a blank object. And then for the style, using the bracket notation, we're going to set some of the attributes. So similar to what we just did in the last lesson, where we're going to be setting using the DocumentApp attribute class and setting the foreground color. So whatever we want to assign the foreground color to. So just have the hash value there. And maybe we want to make it whatever color that's going to turn out to be. And then also we'll set the background color. So selecting the background color. And I'll set it the opposite color. And then we'll apply the style to whatever gets returned back from the selection. And let's also just make sure we do have some lorem text. So add in some lorem text into your document. And we'll reset the color and the size of the font. So we do have some occurrences of lorem. Let's run the code, see what happens. It actually set the entire document green. So we're not able to replace the text because this is still, whenever it's returned back, it's still referencing that entire element. That's the current element, and that's the body element. So we want to find text within the body. And this is going to require the search pattern or string that we want to find. And because we've replaced it with the value of Lawrence, so let's add Lawrence in as the text value that we're going to be looking for. And we'll log out the contents of founder. So within the log, and for now we're going to not set the attributes quite yet. So let's run. And that returns back a range element. So it's providing the range. So within the logger log, and for founder, we can get the element. So let's run the code one more time. So the element is being returned back as text. And with text, just as we saw before, we can set a style. So we can set attributes to text. So apply the style to that element. And I do want to move style up. And I'm going to update some of the colors here as well. And now let's try to run that one more time. The reason that's highlighting just that first part is because it's selecting this as the element, and we need to loop through the rest of the elements. So let's clear out the colors, reset the text color, and clear all of the formatting of the document. And when we get the found elements, what we want to do with the found elements is we want to loop through them. So we're finding the text, the matching text, and we're going to create a while loop that's going to loop through while founder is not null. And then when founder is null, then that's going to break the loop. So let's create a variable to hold the value. And we want to get the founder. And we're going to loop through all of them within this object and get the element as an object. And then we want to get it as text. So return it back as text. And then use the logger log, and we're going to output the value of val. And comment out some of the stuff that we have here, as we're not going to be needing to look at that. So as we loop through, we're getting it as text. And we've also got within the element as well, we've got an offset. So let's get some more variables. So we can pick up within the founder object. So the first item within the founder object, we can get the offset start, the start offset value. And also for the end within the founder, we're going to get the get end offset inclusive and log those into the log and end. And then we want to move on to the next match. So let's select founder, and we need to update this to be let. And then we need to pass it back into the loop. So it will continue to loop through until it's found all of the available items. Let's run the log. And we get a bunch of numbers here. So we get the text object. So this is the first occurrence. This is where the second occurrence is, the start and the end, and the third occurrence, and so on. All of the starts and the ends. So now that we've got the start and the end of the element, where we want to set the background color, if we want to set bold. So we can take the founder object and because we've got the value as a text object, we can set attributes to that element. And let's apply the style attribute to the element. And let's run through it one more time. So it's being applied to the parent. And let's do a complete reset on the document itself. And I'm going to resave the document just as a plain text document with some lorem ipsum text. So I reset and cleared the document. So we can try that one more time. And instead of setting to val, we're going to just, by default, we're going to set the background color and the foreground color. So selecting the background color, and we have a start and an end value within the arguments that we can provide. So start and end, and these are going to always be changing. So the background color, and then we'll also set the foreground color. So set background color, set foreground color, and that's also start and end, and whatever we want as the foreground color. So I'm going to set that to just white. So now let's run through it and see what happens to the document. So I've cleaned up and reset the document, run the code, find the occurrences of it, replace it with Lawrence, and create a red background and a white foreground for the text. And also I'm going to add in some more occurrences of it. So because it's not case sensitive and it's not looking for any spaces around the text, let's run the script one more time. And we should find all those occurrences of lorem. They've been now replaced with the word Lawrence. and we've highlighted them with a red background and white text. There's quite a few that were found in that instance. So go ahead, try it out, and select some content. You can try the replace text, and then also the find text, and then loop through the found text and select all the occurrences of it, and then you can make some type of updates to it. And this is just going to be a regular text object. So you have all of this where you can set the text as well. You can check, you can get the parent, you can get the attributes, the background. So there's all of these methods that are available. In this lesson, we're going to be adding list items. So list items are actually paragraphs, but they're associated with the list ID. And we're going to also be using the bound script. So I've pasted some lorem ipsum text within the bound script so that we've got something to interact with. So let's create a function, add list, and we want to select the body contents. So selecting the body contents using the document app. And because this is a bound script, we can get whatever the active document is. And then within the active document, let's get the body object. So that will give us all the body content. And within the logger log, we can take body and we can edit as text. And then we can also get the text that is associated with the content. So just get the text object. So it's going to return back the entire text object from the body. So do a quick run. Just make sure everything is working properly. So there's all of our text that's contained within the current body of the object. And now we want to take the body and we want to add list items. So we want to append a new list item to the body. So set up val1 and take the body object and append the list item. And let's call it item 1. And we'll append that to the list. So let's run, and this is appending a list item. So let's see where it adds that content in. And then also within the logger log, now for val1, we can get the list ID. Because each list is going to have its own ID. So because we've added in a list item, we can generate a list ID. So let's see what gets returned there. And that's going to be our list ID. So if we append any other list items, we need to use this list ID. So copy it. So there's our list items that it's adding it to. Let's clear out the content. And we'll also clear out the list items and run the bound script again. And it's going to provide us a different ID. And if we select the body and we append a paragraph, I'll just give it a name of new list. And we do the same thing that we just did. We're going to append a list item. So we've got a list item 1, and let's do list item 2. I'll add in a space here. And it's going to get whatever the list value is. And this should actually be 2. So we're just throwing an error there on the const. So let's run that one more time. So we've got, it appended it to the original list item. And because now we've got a new list here at the bottom, let's see what happened. So we've got 2 separate list IDs. So the first one, because we just simply added it to the next available object, it automatically took the list ID. But because this one now had a paragraph in between, then we started a brand new list. So if we want to append to the existing list, we can use the list item by doing a set list item. So let's take the val2 and we can set the list ID. And the parameter that's expecting is whatever the list ID is. So let's select that same list ID. And now we're going to see what happens when we add the item to the list. So now this new list item and let's get rid of this, clear out the content, and we'll run it one more time. And in order to set the same list ID, the ID is contained within the object. So we would set it with using the object, and now let's run it. So now we've got two items that are part of the same list. So even though we've got content in between, we've got a list that picked up and started and then picked up afterwards. So we've got the same list item for the list values as long as we're passing in the list object. Let's create a loop, and we'll add a bunch of items to the list. So starting I equals 0, well I is less than 10, we'll increment I by 1. And then here we're just going to add to the list items, but we're always going to set the new list item value to whatever the val 1 was. And this is just a temporary value. So we're going to be always reassigning it, and then we're going to take whatever the value of I is and add I plus 2. So let's run the code. And we get a bunch of list items that are generated, and they're all part of the same list. So even though we've got the paragraphs in between, we're still listing them out as still part of the same list. So we can do that within the for loop. So that's how you can add list items. Go ahead, try it out. So in the past few lessons, we've had to constantly clear out the document of the changes that we've made. So in this lesson, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be creating a document that we can use as a template, and then going forward, we can copy the contents of this into our documents as needed. And that's going to be the function that we're going to be creating in this lesson. So it's a quick exercise copying the content from one document into another document. So let's make a copy of this, and I'm going to just call this template lorem ipsum. And this is what we can use as a lorem ipsum template. So we need to get the ID of the document, and this is going to be the source ID. And let's create the function, and we'll just call it add lorem. So it's going to add the lorem ipsum from the source document into whatever document that we want to add it in, and in this case we'll just add it into the active document because we're going to be using the bound script. So we want to clear out the existing content within the active document. So let's set up, and we're going to grab the body content. So within the body, using the DocumentApp, we're going to get the active document and then get the body from the active document. So that's going to be where we want to place it. And then we also want to set up the source lorem and get the body content. So using the document app, we're going to open by ID, and the ID is going to be the one that we've just placed here. So setting up a variable, we can give it a name of ID. So we reference the ID of the target of the source document using ID, and then we'll also get the body of that object. So we've got connecting two different documents together, and for the current document, we want to take the body and clear the contents of the document. Let's run the script. And so we run the script, and that clears out the content of the body of the source document or the target document. And now we want to get the contents that we have within the lorem ipsum document. So let's set up a variable, and we can call it data. And from the source lorem, we're going to get the text content and append paragraph, and we're going to append that paragraph with data. So let's run and see what happens. So that allows us to really quickly bring in the content from the template document and build content into our document that we can use. So it allows us to add the lorem ipsum into whatever the current document is. So we can run that and we can clear the contents and add that quick copy of the document content. Let's start by creating a function that's going to add a table. And this is going to be adding a table to our document. So we need to identify and we're using a bound script. So the body contents are going to be contained within the document app. And we're going to get the active document and then the body object from the active document. And then within the body itself, we want to append a table. So let's first, we'll create an array. And the way that the tables work is that this is a multi-dimensional array. So just as we see with spreadsheets, where it's an array within an array, and each row is a separate array. And then the columns are separated out by commas. So we've got the column 1, column 2, and column 3. And then the contents again contained within each one of the columns. So I'm just adding in some dummy placeholder data, and that's going to be our basic array that we're going to construct the table from. So that's the only parameter that the array method or the table method needs. So we can append a table, and then it requires the multi-dimensional array format for the table structure. And also we're going to take the body and clear any existing content from within the body. Let's run add table, so the bound script, and we constructed the table. So the format, again, is very similar to what we saw with the spreadsheets. And with the spreadsheets, we know we can create table contents. So let's grab this content. We're going to create a brand new spreadsheet, and then we're going to copy the spreadsheet content directly into the doc. So I'm going to add a few more columns there. And of course, tables are a whole lot easier to work with within the spreadsheet. And I'll just call it test data. So the objective is to take the data that's contained within the spreadsheet and then apply it and add it into the table that we have. So let's first select the data that's in the spreadsheet. And we can create another function for that. Get data. And we can use this to return the data. So using the sheet, and within here we can use the spreadsheet app. We can open by ID, and then we're going to identify the sheet with the ID. So we're calling it externally, give it an object of ID, a variable name of ID. And then from here we want to get all of the sheets. So we get the sheet object, and then return back whatever the first one is. So we're just going to be using whatever the first sheet is, and that's going to return back the first spreadsheet. And in order to get the data, we're going to use the spreadsheet object, and we're going to get the data range. So it's going to return back all of the data, and then get values in order to get the array of values. And within the logger log, let's log out what we have so far for data within the get data function. So run the get data function. We need to provide permissions because we're connecting to another, we're getting additional permissions where we're viewing the spreadsheet. And we see that we get this nice structured data, and this is the same thing that we have within the array. So for the array itself, when we create the array, we can run a function called getData, and this is going to return back the data from the spreadsheet in an array format. And all we have to do here is do a return of the data. So now let's try to run add the table and see what we get for the bound script. So we can effectively bring the table data from the spreadsheet into the doc. So this is from an external spreadsheet just by going through all of the available data. The structure is the same, and adding to tables, it's really easy format when you're appending to the table. And within the logger log, let's return back val. So this is going to be the table object that we just created. And this is now a table object. So for val, we can use the insert table row, and this is just expecting an index. And the table row itself is going to be an object that we can then again reference, and we can insert table cells into the row, as well as we can set attributes. So I'm going to be showing you how to do that. So what happens is that whenever we do the insert table row, it's going to return the table row object that then we can use within the script. And let's assign an object value to this row. So insert table row, and then within a row, we can insert table cells. And if we want to insert data into the table cells, we need to specify the data that we want to, as well as the index value of the child. So within this table, we've got 3 columns. So we can start with the index value of 0, and then 1 and 2, and insert some content into our newly created row within the table. So let's insert that first, and then we'll insert in some text. And insert it within the first index there. And you can specify which index value, and that's going to be where you want to place the row. So add table, and we've inserted it right here in the top. So let's go ahead and add some more content. So we already inserted 1 cell, and then we can illustrate which cell we want to add the values to. So let's try that one more time. And that way we can add in all of the cells there at the top, or we can also specify which index value for the row that we want to set them. And now we're going to set it at 4. So it's going to pull in all of the data from the spreadsheet and then add all of the table cell values within the specified row. We can also set attributes to the table itself. So we're going to set attributes of style. Selecting the style object that we had worked with in the earlier lesson, I'm going to bring it into this project. So I'm going to just copy and paste the style object that we had before. And for the attributes of the cell, we're just going to drop in the style object and see what happens. So that provided us and gave us an option to style the content of the row that we've just added in. So that's how you can add tables with data within the tables within your Google Docs. The UI is available for the bound script for the document, and uses a reserved function on open. And so this is going to be a function that automatically is going to run whenever we open the document. And this also gives us the ability to add to the UI menu. So let's grab and set up the UI object. So using the document app, and we're going to get the UI of whatever the current document is. And then within the UI, we can create a menu. And the menu is going to require the 1 parameter, and this is a string value for the caption and whatever we want our menu title to be. So it's the menu that the users are going to be selecting. And then we have an option to add items. So the items require 2 parameters, and the first is going to be what function we want to run. So this one is just going to have an alert pop up, and then the function that's actually going to run pop up, and we'll call it pop up alert. And then we can also add in separators if we want. And we can add more items and submenus as well. So this will be showing you the prompt. And then the function name will prompt. And then lastly, we need to add, and that should not have the colon. So lastly, we run the method add UI. And then that's going to be the end of that statement. So this will run whenever we open up the doc. So if we were to go and refresh it, that's going to automatically close the bound script editor. So we're going to have to go into script tools, script editor, and open up the script editor. But we have added in the advanced menu there. So we've got an alert and we've got a pop-up. So we don't have any functions yet associated with it. So let's create those functions. And this one was pop alert function. So this one is going to run when the alert button gets clicked. And then we've got pop prompt, and that's going to run whenever the prompt button gets clicked. So what we want to do is we want to show the UI object. So again, doing the same thing that we did here, we're going to get the UI object into a variable name called UI. So using the document app and get UI. And we're going to return back. So we're going to get an alert with the response. So response. So using the UI alert method, and I'll just ask a question, do you like docs? So the other parameter is that we want to set a UI button set. So you can specify the button set that you want to use. So you can do as an OK, cancel, yes, no, cancel. So we'll add in the yes, no, cancel. And then let's launch the UI alert and show the user your response. And actually this is expecting a string value. So let's wrap it with quotes and whatever we responded to. So now let's try the pop alert. We don't have to refresh it. So do you like docs? Yes, no, or cancel. So there's all the button objects. Let's hit no. Your response, no. So we return back a value of no from the response on the button set. So we can also do a condition for the response and check to see if the response is equal to UI button and see if the value of the button is yes. And then our alert message. So let's create a variable for the message. And I'll just say, why not? So within the message itself, and if the button is equal to yes, then the message is going to equal great, happy to hear that. And then close off the quotes. And because I am using the single quotes to wrap the string, I need to break out of the single quote. And why not? So let's run and go over to the bound script. And let's see what happens within the alert. So do you like docs? And if I go no, it's going to go why not, too bad. And if I answer yes, it'll say great, I'm happy to hear that. And then you can add and chain additional responses here. So you can continuously pick up what the response was on that and continue a conversation. There's also the prompt. And the prompt, what this does is this allows us to actually get response text. So whereas we're just kind of restricted to the buttons, this is where we can actually get the response text. So this is also contained within the DocumentApp UI. And here we're going to get response text. So we use the UI object. And then the prompt menu and passing in rate 1 to 10, 1 to 5. So we can also set the buttons. So it's expecting a prompt string as well as buttons. And there's some example here of the prompt. May I know your name? So yes, no. And if it's yes, and if it's no. So it just logs out different information into the log in that example. So here we'll set the UI and the button set where we've got just OK or OK cancel. I'm just going to keep it at OK. And then check to see if the response selected button is equal to the UI button OK, then we know that we've got a rating. Otherwise, we don't have a rating. But we still might have some response text in there. So here we can pop up an alert to the user. Why did you close it? And the UI alert. We got the rating, and then we can add in the rating, the response text rating. So let's create a holder and we'll get back the response text from the rep and get the response text object. So this is going to hold whatever was sent back from the user that was filled into the input field. And so we can use that here where we can get the response text and add it into the alert. So let's try up the pop-up prompt. Rate 1 to 5. So if we close it, we get an alert that says, why did you close it? If we give it a rating and hit OK, then we still get why did you close it. So let's do a little bit of troubleshooting there. And I do need to run this as a method. So that's why that wasn't working. So let's try that one more time with the prompt. And we got a rating of 4. And let's also try it on the close. So why did you close it? So now the script is working properly. And of course, you can extend on what you've learned in this lesson with the prompts and the alerts, creating some interaction with the users within the doc menu. So what we're doing in this lesson is we're going to be adding a function that we can go anywhere on the page. We can click the function and it'll add in some lorem ipsum text, and that lorem ipsum text, we're going to bold it, and that's also content that's coming from an external document. So that's all the content that's sitting within this template doc that we've also set up. So let's get started. Hey, let's set up the onOpen function. So set up a function onOpen. So that's the default function. And we're going to add to the menu whenever we're opening up. So within the document option, let's grab the UI object. So DocumentApp, get the UI. So it's going to give us the UI object. And within the UI, we want to create a menu. And then what do we want for the menu? And we'll just call it fun. And within the menu, we can add items. So the first item will just be lorem ipsum. So it'll add some lorem ipsum text. And we'll just create a function called adder. And then add to UI, run the add to UI method. So that's within the onOpen. And now let's create the function adder. So this adder function is going to add content onto the page whenever we press the button from the menu. So let's just run the onOpen so we can add it to the bound script. So now we've got the function fun, and it's not doing anything right now. It's just running the script. So if we want to get the cursor position of wherever the cursor currently is, we can get the cursor object by using the DocumentApp and getting the active document. And then get cursor is going to return back the cursor object. So it's going to be wherever the current cursor position is. So it gets the user's cursor in the active document. The script can only access the cursor of the user who is running the script, and only the script is bound to the document. So basically what this is doing is this is returning a cursor position. So we want to check to see if cursor exists. So if this is being returned back, so if we don't have a null value, let's update and add to the cursor. So we'll insert some text to wherever the cursor position is. And take the cursor position object and do an insert text. And this will insert some text here within that object. And if we're able to insert the text, then we can take that object and we can set the background color of the object. And we'll set the background color to red of the object of the word new. So let's try it out. So going in wherever we've got some text, and we hit fun, lorem ipsum, and that generates and adds in the word new into that text object. So instead of adding in the word new, we want to add in some lorem ipsum text. So that means that we need to get the text object. And this is similar to what we just did before in the earlier lesson, where we're selecting the content from a template object. So let's first set up the ID and get the ID from the doc where we've got the lorem ipsum text. And I've shortened it just so that's one paragraph that we're adding in. So it'll basically add in one chunk, one paragraph of content. And we want to get the source content. So using the document app, we're going to open by ID, so specify the ID of the object. And then we want to get the body of that object, and then that way we can also get the contents of that. So we can just do that within one statement. So get text, so it's going to return back the contents of that document as text, and then we can insert that content in as source content. And instead of setting the background color, we can set it to bold and set that to be true. So try it one more time. So wherever the cursor is, it's going to drop in the text as bold text onto the page. And so now whenever we need some lorem ipsum text, we can just click the function button and have it dropped in and added in. And it's as easy as that to add some really cool functionality into your project. So what we're going to be producing in this lesson is we're going to be adding to the UI menu. So we've got another function under fun, and it's called highlighter. So within this highlighter function, we can search out for a particular term that's within our document, hit OK, and what it's going to do is it's going to highlight each one of the found instances of that word within the document. So that's what we're building. Hey, let's add one more function into our menu. So we're going to build on what we did in the last lesson, and this is going to be we'll just call it highlighter, as it's going to highlight the text. And we'll create a function that's called highlight. So within this function, we're going to select and using the UI object, and then using a prompt. So let's get the response text and UI prompt. So it's going to pop up a prompt asking the user a question. Highlight what? And then the UI button set that we're going to use is going to be just OK or cancel. And then once we get a value of OK for the button set, so let's make sure that the response selected button method is equal to the UI button OK. Otherwise, we're not going to run the function. So within this function, we want to get the response text. So response text is what we're going to be searching for. So we want to highlight this value. So we're going to use the find text. So let's also get the body object. So using the document app, and we're going to get whatever the active document is. And then that's going to just get the body object. And that's going to allow us to search within the body object. And we'll create a value called search me. And then within the body, using the find text method, we're going to search for the text content from the response text. And let's set that up as, I'll just call it find this, and we'll get the response text object. So we can just use the variable values for this. So it's looking for the response text. And then let's do the loop, just as we did before. If search me is not equal to null, so that means that we can continue to search. We're going to select the value of search me and get the element where search me is located and set the element as text. So that will provide us a text response for the search object. And then we need to get the start position. So this is going to be the search me, and we're going to get the start offset value, and the end position is search me, and that's the end offset inclusive value. So it's going to give us a start and an end position. And then in order to set the highlight, we can get the text and set the background color starting at start and ending at end. And then let's set the color that we want to set it up as. And I'm not, again, sure what color that is, but we're just going to set a color value. And then for the foreground, the same thing, where we're starting and where we're ending. And then we're just going to set a foreground color of white to it. And we want to restart the loop. So while we've got it within the while condition, we want to move to the next item. So within the search me, we do body find text, and the text that we're still looking to find is still within find this, but we're just going to be looping back to the next available item within the search me. So let's see how this works, how the highlight works. And I need to add to the on open so that under fun we have highlighter, and let's search for lorem. So it highlighted all the instances of lorem on the page. And I'll set the background color, and we'll set the foreground color to this, and we'll try it one more time because it's a little bit hard to see. And highlighter, so search for lorem, and try that one more time, as we need to do it with the uppercase, because it is case sensitive on the search and the find. So there we go. So now we're able to highlight text. And there's another word. And try it one more time. So highlighting all of the instances of that word that's found. This lesson we're going to be doing the showing of the modal dialog and also showing the modal less dialog. So let's start by creating a function and using the onOpen function, just as we did before. So running the code whenever the document is opened, we need to select the UI object. So selecting it as UI and using the DocumentApp, get the UI object and return back into the UI variable. And then within the UI, we can create the menu. And for the menu, we're going to stick with what we had before. We're just going to type in advanced as the menu and then add items to the menu. So one is going to be to open up the HTML modal. And we can just list a method called modal1 for this one. And also add another item. And this is going to open up the HTML. And this is going to be for the modal less. So modal less, and we can run a function of modal2 for this one. And I'm just going to quote around there as it's expecting a string value for the method name. And then lastly, we add to the UI and save it. And we'll refresh the doc. So we've got the modal options here within the advanced. So the HTML modal and the modal less. So let's create the functions that are going to be associated with the modal opening up. So modal 1 is going to be the first function that we're looking at. And then also create the second function and call that modal 2. So we want to output some content into the output. So creating some HTML that we can output into the modal. And we can just do a hello world in here. So h1. And then setting up the const. So setting up the HTML value using the HTML service to construct the HTML content. And within the service, we're going to create the HTML from output. And this is going to just use that output value that we just created. So create the HTML from output. And we also have some parameters that we can set. So we can set the width of this and set it to a number value of 600. You can also set the, I got to get rid of the semicolon there. It's attaching it to the HTML object. So also set the height of the object. So whatever number of pixels you want the modal pop-up to be. And then once you're ready, you can add it to the document app by getting the UI object and then running the method. And you've got some options here. So you can show the modal dialog, and then you could show the modal less dialog. So let's go ahead and show the modal dialog. So it's expecting some HTML, so the HTML object that we've constructed, and then also create a title for the pop-up. And save that, and go into the document, and let's run the HTML modal. So that gives us the HTML content as h1 being output. There's the title for the modal. And that's just the default modal structure. You can also output, and you can create output from a file. We've got the pop-up HTML file, so just a plain HTML file that's going to pop up the hello world and a paragraph tag there. So let's create the output that we want to show, and we can use an object called HTML for that. And then using the HTML service, we're going to create HTML output from a file and selecting the file name that we want to select. So that should correspond with what we've got here in the top left corner. So you don't have to include the HTML. This is just the base file name without the suffix of the extension. And also let's set the height and the width for this one. So you can adjust these as needed. And then let's output the content. And instead of show modal dialog, let's select the show modal-less dialog, selecting the HTML content that we want to output, and then adding in a title when this is expecting a string value as the title. So just do a title modal and go ahead and save that. So let's see the modal-less option. So the modal-less option popping up. And the difference is that we can still see the content underneath for the modal-less. So we still have access to access it. And the modal value is going to gray out the content in the back. So when we do select it, we can move it around, but we can't access the content that's underneath. So those are the two options that you have for the modal. And this one, you can click on it and hold the mouse button down. That allows you to drag it around, and then there's also the close button there. And you can also access and even type and update the content that's below the modal pop-up. So depending on what your requirements are, you can either use the show modal dialog or show modal-less dialog in order to output the content. And they both work the same way with the HTML service, where you construct the HTML content that you want to output to the modal. In this lesson, we're going to be adding to the menu, and we're going to be able to show the sidebar option. And we're going to use the same pop-up file, so HTML modal, and this is going to be just for the sidebar. And I'll just call it side 1 and side 2. So create a couple functions in order to handle that. And file sidebar. So add that to the UI. So run the onOpen. And that's added to the UI. So there's our menu options. And now let's create the functions for it. So side 1 is the first function, and then side 2 is going to be the second function. So we're doing something similar to what we just did in the last lesson, where we're creating some HTML and then we're generating the output from the HTML. So most of what we did in the last lesson is fairly similar. And the only part that's different is where we actually use the document app, we get the UI method, and instead of doing the modal, we're going to do the sidebar. So showing the sidebar, and within the sidebar, it's going to require the HTML object. So let's try the first sidebar. So this is just the regular HTML side. So generating the HTML code, placing it within the sidebar. And then the second one, where we're generating it from a file. So we're generating the content from the pop-up file, and we're going to place it within the modal on the side, on the sidebar menu. And this is coming from the file, so generated from the file, and this is the regular HTML file. So within here as well, if you wanted to update the style properties, and select the body and set up a background, you can set the background to be red. And so that will just run regular typical HTML and apply the styling, as well as for the pop-up modal as well. We can see that it's the same file that's being generated there. And this is just regular HTML. You can add whatever HTML you want here on the client side and have it run. And then within the code itself, we can use it within the sidebar, as well as we can use it within the modals. Or we can create our own custom HTML code using the HTML class. This lesson, we're going to be inserting an image into our bound doc. So let's create the function. Now let's call it insert image for the function name. So first, let's select our document object, and we're going to get the body of the document object. So do this with all one statement. So using the body variable and document app, we're getting the active document because this is a bound script, and then get the body of the active document. So ready to write to the code. So we need to get an image. So let's take a look and see where we can get the image from. And we're going to pull that image off of the internet. So we're just going to generate an image and using URL fetch app. So this is how we can make a fetch request to an external site and return back content contained on that site. And in this case, we want to generate an image file. So we need a URL for the image, so it requires a URL value. So let's create a URL variable, and I'm going to just use the dummy image generator. So that's over here. There's a website, dummyimage.com. So it's a great place for some placeholder content. So selecting that as the URL, and I'm going to make a fetch to the URL, and hopefully I can generate and return back the image. And it does require 2 arguments, or it requires 1 to 2 arguments. So that's the URL fetch, and it's returning the content back. Because this is an image, we want to use the get blob method. So it's going to return the image back as a blob. Let's run the code, insert image, and we need to get permissions because we're using the URL fetch method. So it's an external service connecting to an external object. So it looked like we were able to connect properly. So what we want to do is we want to insert the image into the body. So this is going to be our image object taking the body and insert image. And we've got the image as a blob. So it requires the index value of where we're inserting the image. We just insert it at index value of 0, so right in the beginning of the document. And then the image that we've got is contained within the my image variable. So when we go into the document, we were able to insert the image. And let's see what we get back within the log for image itself. So we get it back as an inline image. And another way to add the image into the body, using the body object, and we can use append image. And that's just going to require the one parameter. And that's where we can use the my image as the one parameter. So append is just going to add it to the body, whereas when we use the insert image, the inline image gets inserted at a particular index spot on the page. We'll provide one more example where we're going to add to the UI menu, and wherever the cursor position is, that's where we're going to add the image to. So creating the function on open, and when it opens, let's grab the UI object of the document app, get UI, and within the UI object, we're going to create the menu, and the menu, we'll just call it advanced, just as we did before. We'll add an item to it, and we'll just, this will just add an image. So wherever the cursor is, it's going to add the image. And we'll give it the same function name. And then add the UI object to the menu. Run the on open. So that's going to add that one function, add image. So wherever our cursor is, we want to add the image. Let's create the function to add image. And now this function is going to add the image to wherever we are with the cursor. So let's get the cursor object. And the cursor object is going to be wherever the document body is. So we can just copy that over, and getting from the body. And actually this is coming from the document object. We're going to get the cursor. So we don't have an option on the body itself. So let's make a quick adjustment to there and separate it out and use the document object. And this will allow us to get the cursor. So this is returning back the cursor object. And the cursor object actually lives on the document, not on the body, because the body is where the content is. And now let's select and get the image. So we've got the image URL. We'll use the same one as we just used before. Make it slightly smaller. We'll change some of the colors. And I'm not sure what colors those are going to be. So dummy image generates different images depending on what parameters we're passing in within the URL. So my image, we're going to fetch the URL blob, and then wherever the cursor object is, we're going to insert an image. So insert inline image, and the image is coming from the my image value. So that's the blob that we've got the image on. So let's try it out. So go down somewhere on the page, add image, and we'll see what happens. So it runs the script, adds the image. And this way, wherever we've got the cursor, whenever we go up to the UI menu, it will generate and add the image directly with document within the Google document. So go ahead and try it out. Add some images into your Google Doc. Whether you're working on a bound script or a standalone script, you've got quite a bit of power when it comes to connecting the Google Suite of products together. And whenever you're working with the document app class, there's a lot of different functionality. So the most important thing to remember is to select the document that you want to use. So if you're using a bound script, then you have an opportunity to use the active document, and that also gives you an ability to get the cursor position, and also gives you an option to interact with the UI. So on the standalone script, you don't have those options. So if you are looking to incorporate this type of functionality into your document, then you do need to go with a bound script. And other than that, the differences are very small between the two, and most of the functions that will work within the bound script will work the same way within the standalone script. And the standalone script does give you some added flexibility where you're not tied to a specific document, and if you're tending to create and work with different documents across your drive, then sometimes going with a standalone script is a better option. So as we saw, there's quite a bit of options that we can do with the document. And when we are creating the functions, the first thing that we usually do is select the document. And once we've selected the document object, and there's a number of ways to do that. So we saw that we can get the document object using the document app. And if we've got a bound script, then we just go with the active document. Otherwise, we open it by the ID. And then getting the body was the second part. If you're going to be interacting with any of the body contents, then you need to use the document and get the body. And this will give you the ability to select the body contents of the document. And then within the body object, that's where you get quite a few opportunities to quite a few methods that you can use. So you can get the text, and then there's some high-level methods like finding the text that we were working with. There's also the different children within the body. So if you want to just simply get the text that's contained, you can use the get text. And there's also a number of other ones that we were able to set the attributes. So if we want to set the attributes to entire body element, we're able to do that as well. We can set the margins, we can update and add in links, set the text alignment, and we can get information about the body as well. And if we wanted to append to the body, we can append horizontal rule. So this will automatically add a new horizontal rule to the body. And if we're using it as a data object, and we log out the data contents. So let's run the select document. So what this does is it adds a horizontal rule at the bottom, and it returns back that horizontal rule object. And with the horizontal rule object, you can get its attributes. So you want to list out the attributes that are contained within it. Let's do a log, and we'll get the attributes that are contained within a horizontal rule. Let's run that, and we'll see what attributes we're getting returned back. So with the horizontal rule, we don't get any attributes. Let's try some other objects as well. And each one of these different element types has its own set of properties. So if we were to append a paragraph, that's requiring the one parameter there of the content that we're appending it with. So let's run and we'll get the attributes of that. And so there are default attributes that are set on the paragraph automatically. So you can select and update these attributes as needed. And then also there's a lot of power with connecting the different docs together. So we used one doc as a template. We also used data coming from a spreadsheet and populated content within our Google Doc. All of the source code has been included, and I do suggest that you try the code out for yourself and try the various methods that are available within the DocumentApp class to get more familiar with what you can do with DocumentApp.